but the blessings of the high dam are sometimes deceptive.
Following students earn a $1,000 scholarship by virtue of completing GPAs of 3.75 to 4.0. They are Ryan Clough, Julie Cornelison, Curtis Fleck, Amy Fowler, Amy Kellogg, Michael Osborne, Kim Raleigh, Marcy Scheidler, Vanessa Van Stee. Kim Raleigh, John Tyson. Following two students demonstrated that they could compete in the highest levels. They received the award of the President's Scholarship, demonstrating that they can compete at the 98th to 99th percentile nationally, and by so doing, earn roughly a $20,000 scholarship, 1 year free tuition to Walla Walla College, and 3 succeeding years at half tuition for their outstanding abilities as demonstrated through the SAT scholarship competition. They are Jennifer Schwab, Jeffrey Riss. The final award that I wish to present today is an award that has never been given to anyone who has attended Walla Walla College. It is not listed in our bulletin. It is not a part of our regular scholarship activities. However, given the fact that this student has demonstrated their willingness to go above and beyond in extra effort, this person completed 327.5 units of academic credit, while the class graduating requires only 225 credits. Some have suggested that this person should be placed as a junior in college next year. They took the equivalent of 6 years of academy work in 4 years, and for that we'd like to give this gentleman special recognition, a $300 scholarship. I think Mr. Hurlburt called it the biggest bang for your buck award. A $300 scholarship to Rory Height.
It has been rightfully said, graduating class, that you can always tell a senior, but you can't tell them much. I would like to attempt to tell you just one short thing today, on behalf of the Upper Columbia Conference, and that is that if heaven forbid you should ever at some later time in your life decide to turn your back on the Lord and the church that He represents, that represents Him, that you will never legitimately be able to say that it was because your church didn't love you. As I have watched the people of this conference, including your parents, your loved ones, the people that are out in the small churches that don't have the privilege of being here today to congratulate you personally, and so many others that have given consistently so that you would have the opportunity of completing this education to which you today rightfully deserve the credit. I am totally convinced of the love that they share and express that to you today. Over and beyond that is the fact that our teachers represent so much academically as well as in the area of dedication. Some of you may be aware of the fact that the North American Division of Seventh-day Adventists has started and begun a new program to recognize outstanding Seventh-day Adventist teachers division-wide. There's quite a bit that goes into this, which I will not belabor this afternoon, except to say that nominations come from each conference. They are limited in number. They go to the conference and ultimately on to the North Pacific Union in our case. And during this week, North American Division-wide, There are approximately 100 teachers that are recognized for 2 areas of service. One, their dedication and the spirit of excellence that they have in the academic area and creative teaching. And secondarily, for the spiritual impact they are recognized to give and place upon students. With that goes a citation, a $1,000 check, and a beautiful plaque. And I am rightfully proud and appreciative of the fact that in our teaching profession in the Upper Columbia Conference this year, that 5 of our teachers were recognized as having this quality about and among them. Today, one of those teachers is in our midst. And it's for that reason that your principal invited me here today, and I'm going to ask him to come up and join me right now for this. And I just want to say that on behalf of the North Pacific Union, the North American Division, and certainly the Upper Columbia Conference, but more specifically, Walla Valley Academy, it is with a great deal of pride and respect and appropriate honor that we give this the PAR Award today. It says on the plaque, Adventist Education, the Thomas and Violet Zapara Award, Excellence in Teaching, presented to Charles A. Morrison. Seniors, I didn't think you'd mind my interrupting for that. In case you did, just want you to know we wish you God's richest blessing and congratulations.
Thank you very much. Once in my life I've lost words. You know all about that, don't you? It's, I enjoy teaching. And I especially enjoy teaching at Walla. And, you know, I'm very lucky, I guess. A friend of mine last summer said, Chuck, I wish I could enjoy my work as much as you seem to enjoy yours, and I enjoy mine so very much. And the students here at Walla make it that much easier. Now, for the reason I came up here in the first place. Last fall, I polled the senior class. Who would you like to have speak to you at graduation? And each one of the seniors wrote out a couple names and so on. And, well, this afternoon is indeed my privilege to introduce our commencement speaker today, and that is none other than Mr. Joe Young. Joe Young teaches biology, chemistry, and is our media center director. He's been in teaching for 24 years, 20 here at Walla. He is a master teacher, a friend, and I know a friend to all the students. If you've been here class night and listened to some of the, and also to the Wills on our senior chapel, a couple students said, while you're at Walla, make sure you take as many classes from Mr. Young as you possibly can. His address this afternoon is entitled, Reflecting Excellence.
Class of 1990, Principal Hurlbert, faculty and staff of Walla Walla Valley Academy, parents, media family members, and friends. It is a great honor to be in this position on this day. You would think after going through 4 years of science classes, history classes, math classes, the last thing the teenagers would want to hear is a teacher up in front. So I feel great honor in that respect. But life is a two-edged sword, and it just might be that they said this is the way to give the chemistry teacher the last assignment of the year. It's finally come, that magical moment. Some have dreamed about it, some have dreaded it, some have wondered if it ever would become a reality. Sitting in the auditorium, there are individuals who are probably more excited, more relieved at the moment than the graduates up here in front. Because individuals sitting in this audience have sacrificed for these young lives. You are the recipients of that love, that work, that care. But there are family groups out here, and I noticed when I was even down here last night that some family members, they must have snuck in here extra early or after the meeting Friday night, already had their names on seats in here. This particular family is going to sit here today. There were blankets in places, already looking ahead. It's fun to be a parent. It was a month ago today, that my wife and I were back in Lincoln, Nebraska, and we were watching our youngest graduate. And I had the parent problems. I wanted to be sure that we got inside the church early enough so that I got the aisle seat, and I had to check to make sure it was in the right aisle. I can remember as the graduates were standing up, coming up in front to receive their diplomas, that was the big moment. Mom and Dad fought for this for years, and now the fruition. And as Tony's row stood and walked down in front, I got out of my place in the auditorium and walked down to the front and jockeyed for a position with the other parents so I could get that, that one clip of the handing of the diploma from the president to my child. The other members were just faces, but that one, like some of you, you're looking at one. I got down in front and I thought I heard my heart pounding. I'm squatting down in front. I have my camera here. And memories flying through my mind. It's about 3 people from Tony, and I'm trying to focus in on the person that's getting the diploma to make sure I'm in focus for that one shot, because you get one shot and that's it. And I was looking through my viewfinder, and there was only one person, and then my son was walking on the podium, and I was saying, something wrong with this viewfinder. I can't see through this thing. And then I realized I had the parent problem again. My eyes were missing. And I said, Young, shape up quick. You're going to miss that shot. Look through that viewfinder, get this thing in focus, and take the picture. I almost missed the shot, but I know where you are, parents. I know how you're feeling this morning. And I know thoughts are going through your mind like whatever happened to those years of, Mommy, come here. Daddy, can you fix this? The skinned knees, skinned elbows, the tooth fairy. All those little stories you would tell at night over and over again, even though you knew that they didn't really mean a great deal, but trying to get the little tykes to sleep. Those golden curls playing the backyard sprinkler, the mud patties on the back step. First doll, first dump truck. First ride on that bicycle that was their very own without trainer wheels, and you're not hanging on behind them. Remember that? Oh, how about parents the day they came home with that little piece of paper that said they passed their driver's license. They're competing now with us. The thrills and horrors of parenting, they're exciting. But hold those memories. Moms and dads, brothers and sisters, hold the memory and look at the young person seated in front of you now. Right here is the reason we live. Right here is the reason we have hope for tomorrow. Right here is why the next generation is going to help turn things around on this ugly world. Here's our reason for a better day, a better tomorrow. This is a special class. Each person is unique. Each person has their own thoughts, their own fears, their own inner anxieties, their own frustrations, and yet each one of these seniors is a precious gem in God's mineral kingdom. I like the way Meister Eckhart summed up individuality. He said, "That I am, this I share with all other men. And that I see and hear and that I eat and drink is what all animals do likewise. But that I am I, is only mine, and belongs to no one else but me, no, not even an angel, not even to God, except inasmuch as I and God are one. When I was little, I used to fantasize. And I still do sometimes now when I'm older. It helps relieve whatever it might be that's ailing me. I don't know what some of your fantasies were, class, when you were younger, but I dreamed that it had been fun if I'd been born hundreds of years ago in a wigwam. You can laugh with me if you want. This was my little fantasy. Out somewhere on the slopes of the Rocky Mountains, along a meandering river, into one of the tribes of the mighty Sioux Nation. I thought it had been neat to have been born an Indian. And see, when the cowboy and Indian stories always came along, I was always rooting for the Indian. I always felt like they just got the bad end of the deal. I wanted to be an Indian. So I want to tell you an Indian story this morning. Indian legend has ways of demonstrating the way people look at life and what they want to achieve, and sometimes tells it in a very unique way. If I had been born into that Sioux tribe, at one time I would have been forced where you are to graduate from childhood to adulthood. I would have had a day set aside for me, a week or a month, depending on the tribe, to go out into the wilderness on my own, to go through a series of rituals, to bring back certain things, to prove my courage, my prowess, my daring, that I was worthy to be a member of the elders, that I was a man. There was an Indian lad living in a village whose time was not too far in the distance. And he was thinking about what he had to do, because one of his challenges was to find an area in the nearby mountains where the mighty eagle would come and sit on a rock. And he had to go to that area and camouflage himself in the rock so the eagle wouldn't recognize him. And when the mighty bird landed on the rock, to prove that he was a man, to get warrior status in the village, he would have to reach out and grab that eagle alive. Remove certain primary feathers from the wing and certain tail feathers from the tail, release the bird back alive into the air, and take those back to the camp and proudly display those to the chief. He passed the course if he could do that. Well, this young Indian boy decided that there might be a way around that if he'd think enough, if he was creative enough. And one day he discovered an eagle nest not too far from his village. He decided to climb up the cliff face and look in the nest. I mean, this was what he was going to have to conquer one of these days and overcome one of these birds. And so he climbed up the cliff face and he looked in the nest. The parents were away at the time and there were 2 eggs in there. And he stared at those 2 eggs and he thought for a moment or two, and then a bright idea hit him. Yes, I'm going to take one of these eggs back to the village with me. I'm going to raise my own eagle. Now, he only had confidence in his idea to the point that he knew not too far from where he lived there was a prairie chicken nest. And the mother was sitting out there under the sagebrush on a clutch of eggs. And his mind thought, if I can take this eagle egg back home, I can put it under that prairie chicken, and she can raise the eagle for me, and one day I'm going to be the neatest Indian in the entire country. I'll have my own eagle riding on my armlet, riding on my shoulder as I go through the village, riding with me into battle. I'll have all the eagle feathers I need for my wardrobe forever. I and the eagle become one. So he took the egg, gently took it back down the cliff and out to where the prairie chicken was sitting on her nest, and put the egg under the prairie chicken. And then he waited. He waited. The day came, the eggs hatched. Now he knew he couldn't take care of this baby bird. He didn't know how to feed a little eagle, and he figured that any mother bird would be able to take care of the young. And so he decided to leave the baby eagle with the prairie chicken and let her raise it for him. And as he did so, he figured that eventually he would be able to come out and take the little bird back to his wigwam with him. But class, there's some biology involved here that some of you may be familiar with that started to turn a neat idea into a terrible, terrible result. Now folks, prairie chickens are neat birds. I don't know if Dr. Galush is in the audience here today, but I know he likes birds, and I think birds are God's greatest creation. And prairie chickens are neat, but they live on the ground. They spend all their time on the ground. They don't like trees. They wouldn't sit in a tree if you gave them a tree. They take baths in the dirt. They scratch in the dirt. They eat in the dirt. They always look down between their feet. That's all right if you're a prairie chicken. But if you're an eagle and you're made to soar, looking at the dirt crimps your potential. And the baby eaglet looked around at his peers, and they were all scratching in the dirt. And he started scratching in the dirt. And as the days went by, the baby eagle thought like, acted like, and became in behavior a prairie chicken. And there's nothing wrong with that if you're a prairie chicken, but he was born to soar. One day he glanced up in the sky and looked way off in the distance, and he saw a little speck up there moving around on the thermals, and the thought crossed his mind momentarily, oh man, it would be neat if I could fly, like whatever that is up there. And he looked around him, and everybody around him scratching in the dirt, looking for grubs, for seeds. And so he got back to the busy struggle in life of maintaining a living on the ground. His feathers got disheveled. His talons got packed with mud balls. He was a disgusting sight for an eagle. And needless to say, he brought no honor to that Indian boy. No honor whatsoever. But the Indian boy learned a lesson. He learned a lesson in peer pressure, as we call it today. He learned a lesson about what you behold and what you associate with, you become like. What you read, what you listen to, where you go, you soon start emulating. And maybe in the long run, that Indian lad learned a more valuable lesson than being that great warrior with that eagle on his shoulder, because he learned that we as human beings are born to soar. We're born to reach infinite heights. We are born to achieve the image of perfection, the image of excellence of our Creator, of our God. You remember the chapel? A couple of weeks back, Mr. Vince gave, and I think he kind of entitled something like Monkey See, Monkey Do. Do you remember that one? Very similar. Very similar. Class of 1990. Are you limiting yourself this morning? Are you, as young adults moving out into this world of ours, looking at a very narrow range through the reverse end of the telescope, and the horizon has been shrunk down to a tiny little narrow focal point, or do you see the entire parameter spread out in front of you, an infinite opportunity? Are you shying away from challenges in life? Do you avoid certain individuals by choice, or feel if you associate with them, someone might laugh? Are you, as a class this morning, risk takers? I wish on this graduation day I could tell you that life is a bed of roses. There are beautiful roses up here in front. Most of you are sitting too far away to smell them. I'm just surrounded with perfume, aroma up here. It really smells neat. But most roses that I'm familiar with have thorns on them. And some of my prettiest roses at home have the biggest thorns on them. And it might cause you to come around to the point where you wish that a rose had never been created because of those thorns on the canes. Life is not neat, tidy, and clean. There are no risk-free arrangements. There are no reliable designs of architecture which will stand up forever. There are no fail-safe plans. There is no absolute guarantee in life that in the next 30 minutes everything is going to be going just right. If anything, life is full of the unexpected. Totally unexpected. It was a Sabbath afternoon. We had come home from church at Jim State Academy where we were teaching at the time. My kids were quite small. Alongside our house, we got out of the car, there were some rose bushes growing along the side of the house. And I can remember looking at this one particular rose plant. It was so pretty. My little daughter, Elisa, was getting out of the car. She was about 4 or 5 at the time this happened. And I said, honey, and it's a beautiful day, sun shining, everybody's feeling good, nobody has a cold, no runny noses, you know, smelly feet and all this little problem. You know, everybody's happy and it's just a great day. And I said, Elisa, come here. I want you to smell this rose. So I walked over to this rose bush. There's a great big blossom on it. And I got hold of the stem because she's just a little tight, and I bit the stem down. And I says, honey, smell this rose. I know, it just smells gorgeous. My little daughter in her long curls and her pretty Sabbath dress come running over because Daddy, you know, wanted to share something with her. And she stuck her little nose right in that rose bush. I hadn't planned this. But there was a bee in there. And it nailed my daughter right on the end of her nose. And I want to tell you, what had one moment been absolute ecstasy and light is fantastic became sheer terror, panic, screaming. I felt bad. It was like my fault. I thought, well, my daughter going to think of me. I tried to kill her out here, you know, with the rose garden. That's the way life is. Life is always full of the unexpected. Risk-taking. Charles Swindoll's book, The Quest for Character, he describes living like this. To be a true person, you must risk. Most of us risk very little. To laugh is to risk appearing the fool. To weep is to risk appearing sentimental. Is there mist in some eyes out here this morning? I hope so. Get emotional along with me on things like this. It's all right. To reach out to someone is to risk both loss of your time and complete involvement in another's life. If you expose your feelings to somebody, you're also exposing yourself, and that can be very uncomfortable. Most people don't like to risk that. To love is to risk not being loved in return. To hope is to risk despair. To try is to risk failure. I always like my students to try. I would rather you'd get a C, even a D in a class, and have the experience and the exposure than to not try because it wouldn't make your GPA look good. You might find down the long road of life that that exposure, even though not at that time perfect in your eyes, might be very helpful to you. Risk takers class. Some of you remember January 28, 1986. Good example of the rose bush and my daughter. Beautiful day. Culmination of America's space program was reaching an all-time high. Millions of people, especially children, sitting in classrooms watching on TV monitors that day, that morning, watching a teacher, the first, head for space. A momentous, ecstatic event which all of America and a large segment of the world got involved. Were some of you looking at a TV monitor that morning? Watch the countdown, the liftoff. Hear the shouts around you of your friends. All right, there she goes. And then the explosion. They were risk takers. Every member of that cruise ship knew the danger. They knew at any moment, at any time, in any flight, that their lives could be terminated very quickly. But they risked all so that others might learn, might benefit. Think of the great discoveries of our time, the risk takers, those who put it all on the line. Life is full of risk. Life is full of the unexpected. Swindoll's book, again, I need to just share with you one short illustration he put in there. It's an incredible true story. He talks about an individual by the name of Jay Rathman. Well, this fellow will appeal to a couple of members of this class. There are at least two boys in this class that somehow, during their senior year, have gotten a very interesting affection towards snakes. And I don't know how that's come about. And I'm sure their mothers don't hold the same viewpoint that they do about these reptiles. At least I can inform that directly here in one case. Now, this is a story about a person and a snake. To illustrate again that life doesn't always throw you what you think you're going to get. Jay Rathman lived in San Jose, California. He was a defense worker, worked for the Defense Department as a contractor. He'd gotten a weekend off early in the fall, and he was going to go hunting. He was going to go hunting all alone, deer hunting, near Red Bluff in Northern California. It was a beautiful day. Life was perfect. If he saw no deer, no big deal. The thing was, he was out in nature, he was having a good time, life was great, he felt good, and then it happened. Some of you'd say Murphy's Law is going to work to the max on this fellow. Well, that may be true, whoever Murphy was, because Murphy gets in all of our lives just when we're smiling, wham, and somebody slams the door in our face. Mr. Rathman was crawling up a rock ledge, and he wanted to get over this rock ledge to look on the other side into a meadow where he thought he might see a deer. And as he climbed up the rock wall and just was ready to climb up on the last ledge, out of his peripheral vision on the right side, he saw a blur. Reflex took over in terms of brain analysis. What is this? Reflex said, pull back real quick. And as he pulled back, a rattlesnake was sitting out there in the morning sun. It struck at him, struck right at his head. He actually describes in the event the rattlesnake just barely missed him because he could feel it as it nudged past his jaw. Mouth was wide open. Rattlesnakes have big teeth, big hypodermic needles inside. Rathman was wearing a thick wool turtleneck sweater that day. As the snake struck and he pulled back, the fangs hooked in his turtleneck sweater. They hooked him there. They were caught. The snake couldn't release his grip. Where a snake's head goes, the body generally follows. This was a big rattler, a little over 4 feet long. As Rathman reached to grab the snake wrapped around his neck. Rathman realized that the snake was caught because he said he could feel the venom running down the inside of his sweater. He was in what I would call a full-mode human panic at this stage. He fell off the ledge backwards. Murphy's Law working now here, folks. Going down into the ravine was about a 45-degree angle incline, and he fell backwards head first down that incline. Lost his rifle, his binoculars, the snake wrapped around his neck, and his feet hung up in a shrub. Hanging him upside down, with one arm pinned underneath his body, the snake wrapped around his neck. This definitely was the end of the world. They were not leaving this hunting trip, He then was able to get his rifle that had fallen down beside him, luckily, and he decided if he could just get the barrel of that gun underneath the edge of his sweater, and here he is hanging there, he's got to be careful the way he does this. And he's worried that he's going to pass out because all the blood rushing into his head, as he's in there at this angle, and one arm's underneath him, but he gets the gun and he gets it underneath that turtleneck sweater, and then with all he can do with that one thrust of his barrel, he throws the rifle upward. It knocks the snake loose. The snake bounces off a rock right next to him and falls right back down on his left shoulder. Rathman discovered that day that snakes don't have eyelids. They don't blink. He discovered that snakes can get mad. This snake was not a happy snake. This snake repeatedly was striking at him. It wouldn't leave. I don't know what the problem was here, but there's something about the chemistry. The snake said, I'm staying with this to the end. And so once again, with his one arm, he takes his rifle, and now with the butt of the rifle, he pins the snake down, and then trying to hold that with his shoulder, he reaches over there and says, the only way I'm going to get out of this alive, I'm going to have to choke this thing to death. And so he finally gets a hold of that snake by the neck and starts squeezing. After a few minutes, there's no more motion. The rattles have stopped rattling. And he goes to release the snake, and he can't undo his hand. He's squeezed so hard, it's in a full crank. He's still upside down. Finally wiggles around now. The snake's dead. He doesn't have to worry about falling on the snake that's alive now. He's able to get his other arm free, pulls his fingers open, gets his feet dislodged, goes back to his pickup, and he takes time to search out the game warden of that local area where he was hunting that day. And Rathman's one of those risk takers. He's one of the people that can look at adversity and make a joke out of it, because he walked up to the game warden and he said, sir, I'd like to file a complaint with you about the wildlife that you have here in this hunting area. Class, you've got to turn adversity into humor. You've got to turn it around. Otherwise, life can get very depressing. Otherwise, things in life will really tear you apart. There will be financial crisis. There will be relationships that go terribly sour. There will be marital conflicts which rip apart families, emotional stress, physical illness, and always that unexpected death of a favorite friend or a relative lurking in the background. Friday night, I was delighted when Pastor Nancy quoted from Philippians 4:13. Now, if you've been looking at me, I was sitting back out here on the right side, and I'm looking at the audience. You've seen me sit up and whoa! Because Philippians 4:13, weeks ago, I wanted it to be the key text for you to think on today. Because Philippians 4:13 says, I can do what? All things. Anything. With Him. Right? All things. Regardless of what the problem is. Nothing is impossible. It doesn't say I might. It doesn't say maybe I could, I should. It says I can. I can do all things. Ted Engstrom, in a book entitled The Pursuit of Excellence, talks about people who did all things, and they shouldn't have been able to. May I just share a few lines from his book with you? Totally cripple a person, and you have Sir Walter Scott. Lock him in a prison cell, and you have John Bunyan. Bury him in the snows of Valley Forge, and you have George Washington. Raise him in abject poverty, and you have Abraham Lincoln. Strike him down with infantile paralysis, and he becomes Franklin Roosevelt. Burn him so severely that the doctors say he'll never walk again. And you have a Glenn Cunningham who set the world's 1-mile record in 1934. Deafen him so he can't hear a single sound. And you have Ludwig van Beethoven. Have him or her born black in a society filled with racial hatred. And you have Booker T. Washington, Marian Anderson, George Washington Carver. Call him a slow learner. I wonder if you've ever heard this during your learning years. A slow learner, retarded. Write him off as uneducatable. And who do you have? Albert Einstein. When you feel you're overwhelmed, when you feel there is no way around, remember Philippians 4:13. God says, you and me together, buddy, we can do it. Just watch. But you got to let me get inside. Let me walk with you. We'll overcome. I remember a month ago at my son's graduation, a rather interesting scenario took place. I watched a young person come up on the stage who was totally blind. There was a real round of applause from the audience. The person walked up with her seeing eye dog. And what I thought was really kind of cute, the college actually gave the seeing eye dog a special honorary degree for helping its master get through those 4 years there at Union College. It was a neat situation. A person with a severe handicap, and yet to them, they did not feel handicapped. They had overcome. They had achieved. Sometimes in nature, we see incidents that occur that create what I call the unbelievable scenario. Generally, truth quite often is stranger than fiction. And here's a true story for you. My favorite science writer is Lauren Isley. Written many books, been deceased for a number of years. But in one of his diaries, he recounted an event that I've read many times, and I've often thought about this situation in relationship to people. You talk about seizing the day. All right, let's seize the situation here for a moment. Dr. Isley is sitting out along the lakeside where a small stream comes in. He's in the wooded area, and he's just sitting there. I don't know what he was doing on this particular day when he made this observation, but I can see him there with his notepad making observations about the natural world. He's watching some ducks that are feeding at the mouth of this little creek that opens into the lake. And they're doing what I call tip up and playing with their beaks in the mud and this type of thing. And they're playing around right at the mouth of this stream. And as he's watching this, all of a sudden he notices right down the middle of the creek, here comes a log, a rather fair-sized log. And it washes in the current right in where these ducks are feeding, and the ducks all get frightened and they flap away, and he doesn't think anything about it. And after the log moves out into the lake, the ducks come back, and he's still sitting there in the shadows watching, and here comes another log down the creek, right ducks are feeding, and the ducks scatter. And this happens about 4 times. On the 4th time, the ducks don't move, and Dr. Isley is thinking, this is really strange. There are no floods. This is a nice, clear day. What's going on? He crawls back through the brush a little bit upstream and looks along the stream, and he notices a red fox. A red fox that is watching those ducks at the mouth of the creek. And he's noticed now that the ducks don't fly when the little logs from the beaver dam float into the lake. And Dr. Isley watched that fox move a larger beaver cut log into the stream, get on it, lay down real flat, and here he came. He knew what was going to happen. The fox was risky. It was very risky, probably was doomed to failure. But right in among the ducks, the fox went and grabbed a duck, jumped into the water, swam ashore, and had breakfast. He risked. Are you willing to risk? Are you willing to try the impossible? Are you willing to let your mind take you on the ultimate trip into eternity? Are you willing to let Him, capital H, walk with you? There's a song that is still quite popular in the land today. There's an individual by the name of Old Blue Eyes who sings it. Now, some of you, at least your parents may know who this fellow is. Maybe you're not familiar with Frank Sinatra, but Frank Sinatra has sung a song, and one of the songs he's famous for is, I Did It My Way. It's sort of the cry of humanity. It's a way of saying, look at me, see, I can do it. I did it my way, not his way. I'd like to ask you this morning, class, I have one question as we wrap up. I'd like to ask you a question about what are you doing with your lives this morning as you're seizing that day. Are you doing it your way? Are you doing it His way? It's the summer of 1975. It's the month of July. Hot, muggy, and humid. I've flown to Florida to visit with my mother in Orlando. Remember the days where I grew up your age. Went to Forest Lake Academy, went to elementary school, Central Florida. It's also a very special month because on the 15th of this month is going to be launched the last Apollo of the Apollo mission. The last Saturn V rocket is going to ignite and lift off pad 39. And I'm excited about that. That's a bonus. I get to take Mom over, get to take my 2 boys that went with me. My sister-in-law was down there. I had to leave my wife, unfortunately, in graduate school in Arizona, so she could only hear about the experience later on. I remember the morning of the 15th arrived. We had gotten up real early. The plan was quite simple because I'd grown up in Florida and I knew the areas, and I knew if you want to watch a rocket launch, you don't head for the beaches. You won't get on the beaches. They're jammed, especially a rocket launch like this. So you drive over to Titusville. From my mom's house to Titusville, it's a 45-minute drive. You can get there real quick. I don't care how bad the traffic is, normal traffic. 45-minute run over. We'd go along the Indian River, which separated the mainland of Florida from the Cape. And we'd look for those homeowners that stand out there with signs. You can park on my lawn, $25. Good view, you know. And they make good money that way. And so we looked for the signs, and we found a likable spot where we could drive on this person's lawn, get our lawn chairs out, and go in their backyard and look across the Indian River, unobstructed, straight out to the Cape. I didn't realize at that time that I'd get the biggest traffic jam of my life. I've been in big crowds, but this was the biggest. What took us less than 50 minutes to get to took us almost 7.5 hours to get home after this liftoff. For you see, hundreds of thousands of people had come from all over eastern United States to witness the last Apollo liftoff. We're talking about mega humanity everywhere. We sat in our chairs and we listened to our portable radios and we looked through our binoculars out across the water. It was a beautiful sight. It was a perfect day. There were hundreds of pleasure craft out in the ocean area. Sailboats, big expensive yachts. What was even more intriguing to me was over the flight area, the private aircraft. Now, the Federal Aviation Control had restricted a certain area above the launch pad, but outside that's like a giant hole in the sky because there's this great swarm of private planes arcing around waiting for their view, you know, looking down onto the pad. It's a lot of height in the air, a lot of tension, kind of like right now. You're just about to get that diploma. Hang on, let's go. And I remember listening to the announcer, and finally it was time, and the countdown started, and we were under those numbers of 10 going 7, 6, and I found myself along with thousands of people all around me counting those numbers backwards, going down to 0, and I heard ignition. And I was straining at that time because I had my binoculars to my eyes and I had a movie camera on my shoulder. I was going to get involved in this whole scenario. And we saw that little flash of light. And then that great ball of fire that totally engulfed the entire launch complex. The whole spaceship disappeared. This incredible blinding light. And then the excitement of a rocket launch like this. The ground beneath our feet started to tremor, like a mini earthquake. Those great Saturn V thrusters were jarring the very rock underneath us. And then I heard the sound. Awesome sound. A sound that in earlier missions had been heard as far away as clear up in the Carolinas. A sound like the entire atmosphere was just pouring in on top of us as the resonating vibrations of those exploding rocket fuels moved out from the launch area. Incredible sensation. I was excited. Cameras running all around me. I started hearing something else. It took me a moment to figure this out. What was happening? There's another sound. The sound was people. Hundreds of thousands of people all screaming in unison. Joy, exaltation, praise. The launch is going. It's in the air. All around me. And I was screaming right along with the other people there. And I looked at the faces around me, and every eye was heavenward. And most of the people had a hand over their eyes like this, shielding from the hot noonday sun, looking upward and pointing and screaming. An incredible monster human choir, all shouting joy over one event, and all pointing heavenward. And in that moment, as I looked around me, a strange sensation went down my backbone, clear to my toes. And that sensation was, Joe, this is just like something you've been taught since you were a little boy. This experience is very similar to what's going to happen very soon in Earth history when every eye is going to look heavenward. And they'll probably be like this. They'll be straining to see that object that in this case is coming towards them, not away from them. And I can see them with their binoculars and their scopes, and I can see them pointing. And I can feel the ground under my feet start to shake. And those great oceanic plates and continental plates are grinding together, the greatest seismic activity this planet has ever seen. And there will be a sound coming out of the atmosphere from a choir of angels and the trump of God such as never been heard before, which will just ring my ears. But there'll be that other sound. There'll be that other sound of the voices of every human being on this planet. And there are going to be two types of sounds. Those that say, God, together we did it, a voice of praise. And those that sang old Blue Eyes song, I did it my way, and look where it's gotten me. Class of 1990, Jesus is coming. On that day, when you look skyward, will you seize that day to show yourselves approved before the entire universe?
In these days of confused situations, in these nights of restless remorse, when the heart and the soul of a nation lay wounded and cold as a corpse, from the grave of the innocent Adam comes a song bringing joy to the sad. Oh, your cry has been heard and the ransom has been paid up in full. Be glad, oh, be glad, whoa, be glad. Every debt that you ever had has been paid up in full by the grace of the Lord. Be glad, be glad, be glad. So be like lights on the rim of the water, bringing hope in the storm sea of night. Be a refuge amidst the slaughter of these fugitives in their plight. You are timeless and part of a puzzle. You are winsome and young as a lad, and there is no disease and no struggle that can pull you from God. Be glad, oh, be glad, whoa, be glad. Every debt that you ever had has been paid up in full by the grace of the Lord. Be glad, be glad, be glad. Oh, be glad, whoa, be glad. Every debt that you ever had has been paid up in full by the grace of the Lord. Be glad, be glad, be glad.
The time has finally arrived for these 43 students, 21 of them young ladies, 22 young men, and they come from far and distant places. One is from Ethiopia, another from Yugoslavia. She's our exchange student. And 3 students have commuted daily from the Tri-Cities, one from Pendleton. We have 3 students at what we refer to as accelerants, finished their academy work in 3 years. 15 of these students are graduating with enriched diplomas. 14 are graduating with honors. Mr. Hurlbert, on behalf of the faculty, I would like to present this very talented class to you. Erica Ray Madison, enriched diploma.
Curtis Matthew Brent Fleck. First diploma, specializations, math, science, music, humanities, with high honors. Gina Kim. Liberty E. Harden. Jeffrey Allen Wiss. Humanities vocation with honors. Carrie K. Kuhar. Michael F. Osborne with high honors.
I'd like to invite you to stand for benediction, please.
If our new senior class would please stand. It gives me pleasure to be able to present to you the new senior class of WWVA, the class of 1991.
I thought you guys were behind me, and then when I turned around, when I finally got outside, where I could